Hello everyone, this is Melinda Gosvig with Yoga U Online, and I'm here today with Carol Krucoff, yoga teacher, fitness expert, and award-winning journalist. Carol is co-director of the Therapeutic Yoga for Seniors teacher training program offered at Duke Integrative Health Medicine in North Carolina and at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. Carol specializes in therapeutic applications for yoga for people with health challenges. Welcome, Carol. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Carol, I understand you have a long history of being very physically active. You've lifted weights with Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've done aerobics with Jane Fonda, and you're a second-degree black belt in karate. What sparked your interest in yoga in particular?
Oh, I've always loved moving my body. I'm one of those people who, if I'm not physically active for a day or two, I just get really, really grumpy. So I liked almost every kind of activity. And I was a very serious runner, never very fast, but a very regular runner in my early 20s. Yoga was a wonderful counterbalance for that intensity of running. At that time, in my early 20s, I was also a reporter at the Washington Post, and this is how old I am, I'm 62. So back in my 20s, was before the internet. It was right after Watergate, and I was at the Washington Post, and this was an amazing place to be a journalist. This was the kind of the prime era of journalism. Ben Bradley was my editor. It was very, very intense. And when I started there, we had typewriters. That was even before computers. The first year that I was there, we moved to computers, and those early computers had no ergonomic sensibility at all. So I was in my 20s, I was running intensely, I was at the Washington Post on deadline, I was bent over these computers, and my neck and shoulders got very tense and very tight. So I started taking just a weekly yoga class. For the first several years of my yoga life, it was just this weekly class, and it became this oasis of calm in a very intense world. So I loved yoga. I loved how yoga, it was one of the few things I did that was not just about doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was about undoing, which was really what I
Mm-hmm.
needed so much. And I particularly needed to undo that tension in my neck and shoulders. So I guess that's a long answer to a
Oh
short
no,
question.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you've authored a number of books, among them Healing Yoga for Neck and Shoulder Pain,
Hmm.
which offers unique self-care program designed specifically for those dealing with the neck and shoulder complaints. And you talked a little bit about, your experience at the Washington Post. Would you say that was the inspiration for that book, or was there more also?
Um, that certainly was the beginning of my personal journey, looking
Mm-hmm.
at how yoga could help my neck, kind of chronic neck issues that I had. The other really inspiration for writing that book was how many of my students had similar issues. So at the beginning of a class, it's not uncommon, like many yoga teachers, I'd start the class by saying, okay, how are people doing? What's going on with your bodies today? What do you need? And one of the most common answers I got was neck and shoulders, neck and shoulders, neck and shoulders. And then, of course, in recent years, there have been many articles published on what's going on with our posture because of technology, tech
Mm-hmm.
neck, and using our smartphones and our laptops. It's really becoming an epidemic of neck problems.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I've been seeing even in people my own age a lot of neck and shoulder problems. And
Mhm.
you mentioned the texting and the computers. Would you say those, or is there some other thing that you would say is really kind of the main culprit behind this epidemic that we're seeing in neck and shoulder problems?
What I see both in the classes that I teach and in the individual sessions I do with people is just very poor postural habits. And
Hmm.
there's not an awareness of this. So as we both said,
Yeah.
so one of the things that I love to do in the public talks that I give, I'll start off, talking, kind of get people really relaxed, and then I'll just say freeze. Right now, freeze.
Mm.
And I invite anybody who's listening to this to also freeze and notice. Notice your posture. So where is your head in relationship to your shoulders? What's going on with your spine? Does it have its natural S curve, or is it in a C curve?
Hmm.
And I'm also a big observer of bodies, as many of us who teach yoga are. And I'll look at people's bodies in, say, a coffee shop, um, and most people will be hunched. Their head will be in front of their shoulders. Or when people are driving, head in front of the shoulders. And in addition to that, head in front of the shoulders, very often the shoulders are up by the ears, which is part of the startle response. What would happen if somebody came up behind you and said, boo? So it's a natural human reaction to have this startle response. If we didn't, when babies are first born, they're tested to see if they have these neurological responses. And if they don't have a startle response, it means that there might be something wrong with neurologically. So these are good things, they're good reactions. The problem is that we've gotten way out of balance. Many of us in our culture tend to walk around in a continuous state of startle, and many of us are not even aware that we're doing it. So the number one kind of pointer that I like to convey to people who take my classes is to become aware and just to
Hmm.
notice. And that posture is not something that we only practice on the mat. Posture is something that we do throughout our day. I'd say 24/7, except I want to give people a break when they're sleeping. Certainly it's a good idea to sleep with good posture. That is, don't sleep on your belly if you've got back and neck issues. That tends to be very problematic. Sleeping on your back or your side tends to be. So you do have to attend. It is important, if this is an issue for you, to attend even to how you're sleeping. But it's something that's really important to do throughout your day. So paying attention to your posture all the time. Um,
Hmm.
and here's my dog. Hi, Shanti. She's got great posture.
Animals tend to, it seems. Maybe it's the lack of
Yes.
computers and text devices.
And you'll notice when an animal gets up from lying down, what's the first thing that my dog does? She stretches. She goes into downward dog. She's continually moving around. She does not sit in a fixed position for very long. Um, yeah, and when I do my practice, she comes and shows me how it's done. What's the proper way to do downward dog? You want to say hi? You want to say hi? This is Shanti.
Hi. No, you talked about the startled response, and that kind of tightening up here of the shoulders. Is that something that's like a physical habit we get into, or is there an emotional component that might be involved in that as well?
Oh, very, very much an emotional connection. And that's one of the many wonderful things about yoga, is that yoga is about much more than our physical bodies. Yoga is also about our energies, our energetic body, our emotions, what's going on with our emotions and our thoughts. So it's very much intertwined with all our layers of being. And of course, the yoga toolkit touches on all of that. So recognizing what's going on emotionally and what the emotional component is of neck and shoulder pain can be hugely important in bringing people relief.
Hmm. Now, I was doing a little reading before our talk, and I've come to understand that the neck is sort of like a bottleneck for the flow of nerve information from the brain to the body, and a lot of people struggle not only with neck and shoulder tension, but headaches also. And I was reading in one article that the majority of headaches are what's called cervicogenic. Am I saying that right?
Cervicogenic, yes. So they're
Cervicogenic. Yeah, which I believe means that they originate from problems around the cervical spine area instead of in the head itself. And is this true? that this is a cause of most headaches?
That's certainly a figure and a statistic that I have seen as well. You know, not a physician,
Yeah.
but that generally that's what the literature does tell us, that many headaches are related to tension. So in the neck and shoulders. Also, one area that many people don't become aware of right away is in the jaw.
Oh.
So folks tend to hold, and sometimes it's emotional tension, but there tends to be a clenching of the jaw. There's a many people who grind their teeth at night, called bruxism. They might need to wear a night guard, and even grinding their teeth in the day. So often there can be an emotional component to this, you know, when people are under stress and they're
Yeah.
grinding their teeth. So you can almost feel it if you create that teeth grinding sensation, how that everything's connected. This is what yoga
Mhm.
teaches us, is that it's all intertwined. So the shoulders, the neck, the jaw, the facial expressions that people make, it's all connected. And one of my yoga teachers, Nishala Devi, talks about the throat chakra as being that place that where we speak our truth. And for people who have a disconnect, she calls the neck the super highway between the head and the heart.
Mhm.
So if you think one thing, but maybe you say another, so if you feel like you need to not speak your truth,
Mhm.
you know, if from the yogic perspective, that may also factor into this tension in the neck area. So certainly the spine being kind of a central column of energy. Of course, you know, this is not evidence-based, but this is our yoga tradition. That certainly the emotional component of not being able to speak what you need to say, and certainly in our culture, we talk about having a lump in your throat. You know, you get
Yes.
very emotional. Now, what is that about? I,
Yeah.
don't know that Western medicine talks about that, but we've all felt it when we get all choked up. So there's a lot going on in this emotional nexus. So
Mhm.
it's all plays a factor in our health and the health of our bodies, our minds, our spirits.
Yeah. I know, and this might be more of like a personal thing. I tend to get a lot of tension back here, and I was looking up this area and the suboccipital muscles, I believe they're called, and how they can also play a role in headaches. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. So that's, there's a nice kind of juicy spot right under the occipital ridge
Mm-hmm.
where the neck meets where the skull meets the neck muscles. And the head is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
The head, it weighs, depends on whose head it is, but they say the head weighs about 10 to 15 pounds. The skull is a very dense bone, unlike the long bones of the body that are more honeycomb. The skull is very dense, it's heavy. So think about a 10-pin bowling ball. Have you ever gone bowling?
Yeah.
And think about the weight of that ball. And suppose you were going to hold that ball out in front of you for an hour. Think of how tired your arm would be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got posture, I'm going to turn. If you've got posture where this is called forward head,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see it because their shoulders will be rounded. I don't know if you can see it here.
I
Their
can.
head will be forward of their shoulders. And then because they want to be able to see, they'll poke their neck up. They'll tilt their
Uh,
chin up. And you can see where this whole area would get so compressed and tight. So that can certainly be an area that can create a lot of problems for people from headaches. So one of the important things to do is to bring the head back. And if you look at the physical therapy practices that our physical therapy colleagues tend to do for people who have this forward head, is there's a lot of chin in and pushing back. From the yoga perspective, I like to talk mostly about lifting up and
mm-hmm.
then bringing the ears right over the shoulders as best you can,
Mm-hmm.
as best you can. And many people have some wrong-headed instructions about posture, in part because that's the way people used to be taught. They used to be shoulders back. In the military, they used to talk about shoulders back. Well, what happened when people had their shoulders back and their chin in is it created a lot of thoracic outlet syndrome, which is
Mm-hmm.
can be another big problem. So letting the shoulders be relaxed, letting the chin be parallel to the floor is useful. And a little test of the hi Shanti, she's very interested in what we're doing. Um, a little test of forward head is to just put your finger in this kind of we're number one
Mm-hmm.
position and take the joint at the base of the thumb and put it on the notch in between your collarbones. And hopefully your chin is going to be behind that finger. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not, you might need to make some adjustments. So you can see, so if you're here, your finger's going to be behind. So with
Mm-hmm.
posture, so this is, I call this the neck check. So just play with this, and what might you do to realign? So you might lift more here, you might relax down from the shoulders. So that's just a little pointer to play with to see how you're doing.
Great, great. Thank you, Carol. You mentioned thoracic outlet syndrome. Was that the term you used for when
Yes,
people?
yes.
Uh, just in brief, could you explain a little bit about what that is?
So it honestly, I'd have to really look up the precise
Mm-hmm.
definition, but it's a kind of repetitive stress injury that's caused by compression in the thoracic
Okay.
area. So
Okay.
it's a form of repetitive stress injury.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Um, so when it comes to neck and shoulder pain leading to headaches and all sorts of things, in addition to the complaints that we have with the shoulders and neck themselves, what sort of benefits do you see yoga offering that are unique, as opposed to say what you can get from just stretching or maybe like massaging the area regularly?
Well, yoga impacts pretty much all of the varied factors that play into neck and shoulder pain. So the yoga toolkit includes postures that can stretch and strengthen the area so you can hold yourself in a better alignment. Yoga teaches proper alignment so the physical body is impacted by the yoga practice. Yoga also looks at the emotions that are
Mm-hmm.
involved, so it helps you get connected to the emotional component that factors into neck and shoulder pain, which is different. You don't really get that in physical. I'm a big proponent of physical therapy. I've gone to physical therapists. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful, important tool. Um, but the yoga toolkit, has this. Yoga also involves the breath, which is a very important part of the equation because stress factors into neck and shoulder pain, and the breath is one of the best tools there is to deal with stress. So, and yoga also deals with principles, with attitudes that can factor into neck and shoulder pain. So, the concept of ahimsa, of non harming, the concept of greedlessness, of aparigraha, how does that factor into neck pain? Well, we're in a culture where it's sort of more and give me mine. And if one takes a little bit uh, different outlook of there's enough to go around, you can almost feel the relaxation that that brings into your being when you incorporate the yogic practices of contentment, of loving kindness. Um, so, yoga's really, neck and shoulder pain is a multifactorial issue. There's not just one thing going on for the most part with most people. It's multifactorial, and yoga is a multifactorial therapeutic tool.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. So could you talk a little bit more about, you have a course coming up with us here at
Yes.
Yoga U Online, and we're very excited about that. Could you give our listeners a sense of what will be covered in that course?
Sure. So in the course, we're going to look at these varied aspects of neck and shoulder pain. So we're going to look at first off what the science has to say. So my background is as a health journalist. So looking at, what do we know? What does the evidence tell us about why people get neck pain, and what are the most common causes? What are some of the do's and don'ts? So we'll look at the science and at the current state of the art of medical therapeutics. And then we'll look at all the other aspects of neck and shoulder pain, the postural aspect, the emotional aspect, and then what to do about it. So, okay, we can, put it in our head is what's going on, but how do we take that into our body? How do we apply it in daily life? And what are some of the accessible, practical ways that we can deal with our neck and shoulder pain and relieve it?
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. We're really looking forward to that course. And thank you also for taking the time with us here today. It's been very informative and
Well,
some
it's a
good
pleasure.
tests to try at home in front of the mirror also.
Thank you.
Great. Namaste.
Namaste.